I was called out for misgendering for using somebody's name. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and this video will be dabbling a tiny bit into the realm of YouTube drama, which is something I made a non-official rule against doing much of on my channel once upon a time, and have mostly stuck to, minus dealing with a few serial liars who can't stop making stuff up about both myself and people I respect. But, oh well, rules are meant to be broken, am I right? You see, I thought that this particular happening was interesting enough to make an entire video about because it shows the vehement hypocrisy and defensiveness of certain types of people who I guess we would call tribalistic, full-blown SJWs at this point. Basically, I was recently pretty much called out for some sort of misgendering speech crime. It wasn't in any sort of specific words, I'll show you later. Not just for using incorrect pronouns, which I didn't, I never used incorrect pronouns, but rather for referring to somebody repeatedly by their name. And the person who called me out was not just anybody, but Theron Meyer herself, famous for speaking in front of Canadian Parliament against the dangers of making pronoun speech crimes official law in Canada. Lay what? I'll back this up a bit. All of this started some number of months ago when people kept mentioning a YouTuber that goes by the name of ContraPoints. Some people said that they liked this person, most people said that this person was boring and that they couldn't stand them, but ContraPoints was getting a surprising amount of attention either way. This made me quite curious because ContraPoints is a leftist, and everybody insisted that Contra was intelligent, and I started out myself as a die-hard leftist on YouTube. So I watched maybe the first half of one of Contra's super long videos, decided it was super boring, and then went on to watch Sargon of Akkad talk to Contra on a Thinkery podcast. As I watched, I actually ended up finding myself sympathizing with Contra because despite the fact that I largely agreed with Sargon's talking points more than Contra's, I didn't feel that Sargon was being patient enough in the conversation and allowing Contra, who was obviously very nervous, to really get a chance to say what Contra was trying to get across. Instead, it seemed like Sargon was trying to steamroll Contra, and that bugged me. I mean, why talk to someone if you're really just going to try to pwn them? It's annoying. There were even times when Contra was saying stuff about things like systemic racism in the United States that I legitimately feel that Sargon is undereducated about, and I wished I could have been there to add a bit of insight, as I had made an entire video related to the subject of systemic racism and Sargon's seeming insistence that the black community's only problem is motherlessness. After a number of months went by, I eventually started to hear Contra's name coming up more and more. Apparently, the left-wing blogosphere takes ContraPoints really seriously, as if Contra's videos are some of the only quality socio-political content on YouTube. More so, a few people I know on YouTube also mentioned Contra more and more, and I finally realized, by way of talking to some Antifa-type people, that this person is well respected in the far leftist, anarchist, communist, let's watch the government burn so we can replace it with an entire world that looks not unlike Portland, Oregon type of crowd. At which point, I started watching a few more of Contra's videos, but couldn't get a grasp of what exactly Contra was all about. My legitimate feeling was simply that I was perplexed, which I think a lot of people probably think. Thus, I became interested in actually really having a conversation with Contra. I tweeted at Contra, asking if Contra would be interested in live streaming with me sometime to talk. I said explicitly that I didn't want it to be a debate, which was true, as somebody had already told me that Contra doesn't like to do debates anymore, and I really wasn't interested in that anyway. As I recall, I explained my reasonings super nicely, albeit briefly. The tweets were from about a month ago, so I don't feel like digging them up, but they certainly weren't combative in any way, and I certainly didn't mention anything about Contra's gender. I think I said that I wanted to talk about dramatic writing, politics, and what exactly the purpose of our YouTube channels are, because I imagined that we came to YouTube from somewhat similar socio-political backgrounds. As a result of me tweeting about this, I got dozens of people saying that they wanted to see this conversation and many retweets. Most notably, from my memory, Jeff Holiday, who said that he would be interested in seeing this conversation happen. However, unfortunately, ContraPoints seemingly ignored me. Oh well. Now, this all coincided with me randomly taking a YouTube uploading break for my birthday for a few weeks, so I decided that if ContraPoints was unwilling to talk to me, I might as well force myself to watch some of Contra's videos, which again, I personally find rather boring, even though they are fairly well written and quite well made, simply because I was still curious. I had many questions that I was searching for answers for, almost exclusively in relation to politics. Mainly, I just wanted to know why Antifa people took this person so seriously. Truthfully, Contra's gender basically wasn't a concern of mine in the slightest, if for no other reason than the fact that I have known transgender people for over 20 years, and I simply don't care what somebody is all that much. Some people have known one or two transgender people in their lives and therefore act like they have some insight into trans people or whatever, and they start bragging about it at any given opportunity. For me, I've known dozens and dozens of trans people, non-binary identified people, cross-dressing people, and people with legitimate intersex conditions. So, mostly, I just don't care, because nothing shocks me anymore. Thus, I never searched for videos about Contra's transition, but instead watched numerous videos about capitalism, the left, the alt-right, and that type of content, which I believe Contra is most well known for. While watching some of Contra's older videos, I saw this person refer to themselves as both a cross-dresser and a transvestite, and while a lot of people might say that maybe Contra was joking in those videos, if it was a joke, it went over my head and I was legitimately confused, and I know countless other people are. To this day, I have still never seen any footage of Contra just flat out saying, "Yes, I'm trans, I transitioned, I'm not a cross-dressing male, sorry for the confusion," and I have actually searched for it. I have watched over 75% of that gender dysphoria video Contra made, and Contra still never explained any transition. Unless maybe at the end, but it was long, boring, and indirect, so I stopped watching. The only place I have found Contra saying that Contra goes by she, her pronouns is on Contra's Twitter bio, which I just noticed today. But sorry not sorry for not reading Twitter bios for gender pronouns because I'm not an SJW, and it's just not how my brain works. I'm more inclined to listen to somebody saying out loud that they are a cross-dresser and then go on to assume that that means that they are male. Anyhow, the point is that I didn't know Contra's gender, and I also didn't really care. But more so, as I watched more and more of Contra's videos, I realized that I simply didn't really think I liked this person's ideas or style of video all that much. For a while I wanted to try, but eventually it was pretty simple. I don't think that Contra is cool. I think that they are overconfident about their intellect and knowledge. I think that they are ridiculously pretentious. And I think that they make stuff up about things that they don't really know about in order to please an audience that knows even less. And that act honestly really bugs me. Thus, I made a video where I kinda spilled every drop of my tea all over Contra intellectually and dished out every piece of cake to every other guest at the party. I did so because, sorry not sorry again, I don't think it's acceptable to be what is essentially a propagandist feeding into the collective paranoia of the largely mentally unwell Antifa crowd that often ends up going around physically attacking people because of alleged dog whistles, like the fact that somebody drinks milk. That's messed up. Don't make videos like that. You're smarter than that, Contra. Maybe you're paranoid, but I know you're smarter than that. But don't worry, I'm going to get back to the point of this video. In the video I made about ContraPoints, I referred to ContraPoints generally as Contra, because I felt a need to avoid using gendered language at all. Why? Well, you want to know really honestly the answer to that question? Mainly, it's because after being openly queer for over 20 years, living exclusively in far leftist areas, I learned that when you don't really know somebody's gender, it's best to just not gender them at all, and use their name instead. Because I try to avoid the singular they as much as possible because it's confusing. Also, of course, I know that much of my audience on YouTube thinks that ContraPoints is a male-identified cross-dresser, so it just seemed like the most logical thing for me to do. But even further than that, while this was definitely honestly subconscious, I also got a distinct impression from watching a bunch of Contra's videos that this is somebody that is clearly going through a massive identity crisis. And considering this person is a feminist just for the sake of seeming pure tribalism, I figured there might be a possibility that the cross-dressing thing could be a phase, because again, I just didn't know. Granted, that was really a small fraction of it, and definitely didn't shape my decision to make this. It was really just an afterthought, but I'll admit that that's there. So I called Contra by a shortened version of their name, Contra. Well, as a result of me avoiding using pronouns entirely, I got a number of comments from people about that choice, asking why I did it, including this comment from somebody named Rhea Ann that I don't really know outside of a few Twitter interactions and a few comments on YouTube. Rhea seems nice enough and makes some good points sometimes, but I really know very little about this person. In this comment, I figured that what Rhea was really asking was whether or not I genuinely believe that ContraPoints is trans. And I get that impression not only because of how the comment was worded, but also because Rhea has made a lot of interesting observations about transgender women being biologically male, and stuff that I believe has gotten Rhea labeled as a TERF by some members of the transgender demographic who people would call transgender activists. Thus, I answered the question accordingly, but ended up thinking about it probably later that day because I realized that I had hastily given a massively incomplete answer, as you can understand after watching this video where I have explained myself more clearly. A few days later, I decided to watch Theron Meyer interview ContraPoints at some university in Vancouver, Canada, while I was eating dinner. And it was blah. And honestly, kind of really disappointing, because I used to appreciate Theron Meyer for being intelligent and making good observations about things like authoritarian language and certain aspects of government. You know, Theron Meyer was a big libertarian on campus, so I guess she learned a few things at some time. But this time, I saw a surprising version of Theron Meyer sitting there, clearly not debating Contra, nor even interviewing Contra, but rather, it honestly looked like Theron was just mostly thrilled to be sharing a stage with the most currently popular transgender YouTube personality that talks about politics that isn't Blair White, who I believe Theron had a falling out with anyway. I don't know. I barely know Theron, and I still wanted to like her when I was watching the interview, but it seemed like she was trying way too hard to be agreeable, which is certainly not to say that Theron should have been arguing with Contra, because I don't believe that that was the intention of the talk. Still, she was a bit too agreeable, and such a thing is definitely possible. See, when it got to the point when ContraPoints mentioned Jordan Peterson and his refusal to use a hypothetical non-binary student's pronouns, and that his stance was simply wrong to do so, according to ContraPoints, Theron Meyer just nodded in agreement. Can I just facepalm a few dozen times? Now, I don't really care all that much about Theron at this moment, mainly because she publicly sacrificed a huge amount of her own integrity and principles by doubting her own words and what she made herself known for saying, which was her genuine opinions about intersectional gender deconstructionist madness, or whatever. I don't want to paraphrase her old videos too much, but that's what I would call it in a sentence. Regardless, Theron backpedaled massively and made an apology video to non-binary people where she cried a bit, not unlike Blair White's apology video to Riley Dennis, and I'm guessing Theron made this video most likely, I'm older, I'm just gonna guess about what it's like to be Theron's age, because I remember being Theron's age. I'm guessing Theron made this sobby apology video likely due to social alienation, the urge to fit back in with her peers, and the realization that the right-wing cultural demographic is just as awful, if not more awful, than the left often, which, for the record, I warned Theron about in early 2016 when we first talked. And so I think that she decided that she didn't want to stay on the right, so she decided to go back to the left. I think it's as simple as that. But maybe more so. Theron seemingly wants to be besties with ContraPoints, and as ContraPoints basically brags about in the interview they did together, ContraPoints doesn't feel like talking to people with opposing opinions. Unless, of course, it's somebody like Theron, who is so whipped that she'll nod in agreement about something she testified against to her own government without even asking for an explanation. I mean, seriously, in case you missed it before, ContraPoints said that Jordan Peterson is wrong to not want to call non-binary students by their preferred pronouns under a legal mandate. ContraPoints said that to Theron, who is the same person that had testified alongside Jordan Peterson in front of the Canadian Parliament, saying that she agreed with him. And now, she's so starstruck or something by ContraPoints that she can't even say, "Could you explain to us why that's wrong?" Theron, I'm gonna be real with you. That's just pathetic. You had one job as an interviewer. Ask questions. Now, I'll admit, I wanted to talk to ContraPoints bad enough to tweet a few times, and eventually went on to make a video. But Theron wanted to talk to this person so badly that she's willing to sacrifice all of her public integrity without clear explanation so that she can also be Contra's friend? And then go on to be rude to people asking drawn-out and inarticulate questions in the audience? Regardless, I didn't even really care about that talk all that much, but considering I had already made my video addressed to ContraPoints, and I would have still been willing to chat with Contra, I dropped a comment under the video mentioning that I would still be up for talking. Truthfully, I was mostly just hoping that I would get ContraPoints to watch my video directed at Contra, because really, I absolutely wasn't expecting Contra to talk to me, because Contra has made it clear that they don't talk to basically anybody. However, I never heard from Contra, and instead, I got this comment from Theron Meyer, who I had been warned had become something like a guard dog for ContraPoints, basically proving that theory correct. I'll give you a moment to read what it said, but you should keep in mind that I had asked Contra literally twice on social media to do a stream with me when Contra's little intern came along to tell me that she was filing the metaphorical restraining order. From this comment, a bit of drama developed on Twitter as I went back and added more to the comment that Rhea had posted, and Rhea screen captured it and tagged Theron for some reason that I don't entirely understand, and Theron decided to try to give me a bit of sass. Eventually, ContraPoints got involved themselves. Finally, I hear from ContraPoints. Telling me that I was being self-important and entitled to expect Contra to do a stream discussing a personal matter like a transition without me even knowing Contra, which of course would be true if that was ever what I wanted to stream about at all, but of course it wasn't. I'll say it again in plain English. I wanted to stream with ContraPoints to talk about politics, government, drama, writing, and what the both of us do as YouTubers. I wanted to find what we had in common and what we didn't have in common. I didn't understand Contra's gender, still don't, and therefore avoided using any pronouns at all. I probably would have asked on the stream, but I hadn't even really thought about it. And then after I and a few dozen people who all wanted the conversation to happen were ignored by ContraPoints, I made a video that wasn't the nicest video, obviously, if you watch it, but it was completely intellectually driven and not a personal attack, and I didn't focus on ContraPoints and their gender at all, and I wasn't pushy and said, how dare you not talk to me? I just said, okay, if you're not going to talk to me, this is what I think of you. What do I get from my trouble? A call out for using the wrong pronouns when I didn't use a pronoun at all from a former free speech advocate. Now, maybe this is mostly yet another case of internet telephone games, causing misinterpretations of people's words and sentiments, leading to stupid drama that could have easily been avoided if some people on YouTube didn't try to act like high school wannabe popular girls that I wouldn't have even wanted to hang out with because I was too busy taking running start classes at the community college and DJing at raves on weekends. Or maybe it's worse. Maybe, for some people, libertarianism, free speech, and other such things were all college phases to begin with, prompted as a result of peer pressure and youthful confusion, which will probably be replaced by new forms of youthful confusion. Because, hey, aren't we all just artists anyway? I was a theater major. And I thought Theron was a music major, right? But to Contra, hey, offer still stands. I'll still talk to you. And believe it or not, I'll still be nice. Because despite the fact that I don't have a particularly high opinion of your content, ideas, or attitude, you haven't been overtly mean to anybody that I care about, and I certainly haven't actually seen you say anything particularly mean to me. Unless you did. And it does not offend me that you ignored all of those tweets. I'll even start using she, her pronouns if somebody points me towards the direction of the video where you explain your transition, which for whatever reason I couldn't find. But Theron, I think I've made myself clear at this point And if you have anything to say to me when you mature a bit, I'll probably be alive when you manage to grow up. Assuming that I haven't died of old age by then. And by the way, to anybody watching this video, I'll call somebody by their name as much as I want, because misgendering somebody by using their name isn't a crime. At least, certainly not in the United States.